Hi and welcome to One Patriots Place Live, brought to you by e2gsports.com. And if you're listening on podcast, thank you for downloading. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. So on the mics, you have Steve Balistreri, Thomas Murphy, myself, Claire Classy, Claire Cooper, and we're rather pleased to be joined by Mr. NBC Sports Boston, the smart, the rather talented Mr. Phil Perry. Phil, how's things? How's it going with you?
Everything's great. I need you to tell my bosses that I am Mr. NBC Sports Boston, and hopefully with that title comes a little bit of a raise. Thank you, Claire.
Not a problem. We'll do.
Make him more than a senator. Phil, thank you for being here. How's everybody?
Everybody's great. This is a good time of year. It's not as fast paced as the initial wave of free agency and obviously during the season. So good mix of what I love to do, which is off-season stuff and draft stuff in particular, but also actually get to see the family every once in a while too, which is nice.
How about that? How big are the kids?
What a concept, seeing the family.
I know. We've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old these days, so I no longer have any say in my own house, but it is nice to see them.
Those are great ages, man. I would go back to that over what I have to deal with now. Any day of the week, you just give a cookie and everybody's happy. God, man, stop bugging me. Stop bugging me. Dad, I did the taxes wrong. Could you pay my mortgage this month? Yeah, okay. But no, it is the most wonderful time of the year, without a doubt. I just love it from the last whistle of the Super Bowl until the end of the draft. I am just like going hog wild, and I want to jump off with a hog wild type of question. But is he going to do it to us again? Is Bill going to draft a guard in the first round? Is he going to do it?
I thought you were gonna say, is he going to trade down?
Oh no! We all know that's going to happen. But
yeah, I was going to brace for that one. Brace yourself for that one, because this feels like a real trade down year. With
it does.
The cream of the crop in this year's draft class being, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 12 players deep, I would say, and then they're on. You're really looking at a pretty similar talent level. And so this does feel like a trade back kind of year. Are they going to take a guard in the first round is a great question, because Murph, the last time they did that, and I know a lot of people consider Isaiah Wynn a guard who's been playing out of position for his entirety of his career. But the last time they did that to get a guard was Logan Mankins. That one worked out pretty well.
Pretty damn well.
Listen, if they end up going interior of the offensive line, I think you can feel pretty good about the hit rate there and their ability to find professional high-end caliber talent. And there will be some guys down there that Zion Johnson, we know from BC, he's definitely a guard, but there may be some others that have some guard tackle flexibility down in that 20-ish range of the draft, and maybe even further back if they do trade down. That could start out at guard and maybe eventually kick to tackle, or maybe they're swing tackles who have some guard versatility, like Trevor Penning from Northern Iowa. I know the Patriots look at him as an elite athlete, which he is. You can look at all the testing numbers. I mean, that guy is special physically. I have no idea what's in the water there in Northern Iowa, because last year it was Spencer Brown, who got drafted in the 3rd round. Freak of an athlete. He ends up starting in Buffalo as a rookie, coming from a lower level program. So I could definitely see that being one of their plays here this year. And I'm not sure people excited, Murph, but it might help your young quarterback.
It really would. It really would. And I would, me, man, I love the big fat guys. So, I'd be happy. I want to throw my offensive line draft binky at you that I've been, deep in on. Dr. Strange, Cole Strange. What do you think of him? How do you think he would fit into this program?
I really like Cole Strange. Country strong is how though he's not one of the biggest guys, he has that combination of real, I hesitate to say wiry because he is an offensive lineman, but he's relatively light for the offensive line. He's coming from a small school, UT Chattanooga. But boy, did he hold his own at the Senior Bowl this year against some really powerful dudes. And I won't act like he won every rep, but he won
most of them.
He won more than his fair share for sure. And if you're looking for your next either starter at guard alongside Mike Owenu, who we assume is going to take a starting role, or your next sort of super sub on the interior. He played center at the Senior Bowl as well, and to me, he looked fluid. He looked smooth there. He's thought to be a very smart player. So you're going to get that high football IQ. You're going to get the max out kind of effort that we saw at the Senior Bowl. And we know Bill Belichick, when it comes to these smaller school guys, we know he loves Georgia, right?
Yeah.
He loves Alabama. But if you're a smaller school guy who goes to the Senior Bowl and performs well, whether you're Kyle Duggar or Antonio Garcia or Derek Rivers, now not all those picks panned out, but we know the Patriots are willing to dip into that small school pool if those guys show up to Mobile, Alabama and play well. And that's exactly what Cole Strange did.
Is there, I'm sorry, one more. Is there anybody at Georgia that you particularly liked this year on the line?
Well, Salyer is sort of the kind of go-to person when you're thinking about the Patriots and the offensive line and the needs there, in part because he is really versatile. And obviously he's all those reasons why you would like a guy from that program. He sees the high-end competition. He's getting the high-end coaching. Daily he's seeing high-end competition for sure, facing that Georgia defense day in and day out. And he's versatile as well. He's played snaps at all 5 positions at different points in his career. The thing I would worry about a little bit with him is the athleticism. And we know the Patriots need their guys to be athletic enough, is how Dante Scarnecchia always put it, up front on the offensive line. And so, listen, I could certainly see him in New England. Would I see him with like a top 3 round pick? I guess it's possible, but again, there are a few athletic limitations there that would give me some pause and maybe make me, if I'm Bill Belichick, wait until maybe day 3 to grab someone like that.
All right, great. Thank you, bud.
Phil, initially when I began looking over the draft and like the combine, I was just completely laser focused on cornerback. It wasn't even sort of questioned. But since then, the Patriots have really plucked apart their offensive line. Have you changed your opinions on what the Patriots' biggest need is in the draft, or is it still what it always was?
Yeah, Claire, I think they've actually done a pretty good job in terms of addressing their most glaring needs, so that they can do what they always say they want to be able to do before they get to the draft, which is if they had to play a game today, they'd be able to do it. Now, would you feel amazing about the talent that they have at corner? Would you feel like they could still use a piece at receiver or at the linebacker level? Guard, of course, I would honestly, I'd probably put that as their number 1 need. I don't know if you need to use your first round pick on that position, but they still need a starting caliber guard there. But otherwise, you could play a game today if you needed to. And that's usually what they like to do, to just give themselves some flexibility going into the top of the draft where they don't have to force it. I agree with you. If they hadn't made that move for Malcolm Butler, and again, this guy's been out of football for a full year, but if they get the guy that he was in 2020, you feel like you have a starting caliber player there, and you put him alongside Jalen Mills, who wasn't brought here to be a starting corner, but gave you starting caliber corner play last year. Now maybe that need isn't quite as pressing. And so if you get to 21 overall, you don't feel like you have to force it at a specific position. Corner is actually an interesting one. The one corner that Bill Belichick's drafted in the first round since he's been with the Patriots ended up turning into a safety pretty quickly. It was Devin McCourty. And, the second round has really been where they've dipped into that corner pool. And we know what they've done with undrafted free agents at that position. So I would look there because it is a premium position. There is some premium talent, I would say, through the first round and a half is what I've been told in this year's draft class. I would still be looking receiver, even after Devontae Parker. I would be looking offensive line, and I might even be looking defensive line, depending on how you feel about Devon Godshaw's fit long-term here, and Lawrence Guy, who I love, been, I think, one of the most underrated players in the Bill Belichick era here. But, how much longer does he have? Is he closer to the end than the beginning? There are going to be some big bodies in this year's draft that are really looking like impact players. I'd throw edge in there as well. We can't leave that out. That looks like maybe the deepest position in this year's draft, and especially when you're talking about the second round, there's going to be a bunch of edge guys that fly off the board. And I think you can make the argument the Patriots could use an edge as well. Opposite Matt Judon, you have Josh Uche, you have Ronnie Perkins. Those guys, to me, you still don't really know what you have in either of those guys. So if you could add some depth there, that'd be beneficial too. So to answer your question, Claire, I'm all over the map. I think they've done well to sort of cloud for all of us what their primary need is going into the first round.
Well, before we move away from the draft, then I asked you this when you were on the show, kind of this sort of time last year. I tend to ask it pretty much everybody we have on around this sort of time. So I have to ask you, Phil, who is your draft crush this year?
Oh boy, there are so many, Claire. It's like making me choose.
You were the same last year. You
No.
were like, "Can I have an offensive one and a defensive one?" And it was like, "Okay, we'll bend the rules. You can have two."
I want a special teams one here this year too, because Matt Ariza is got to be everybody's special teams crush this year.
Oh yeah,
a football out of San Diego State. He's a lefty punter. He feels like Bill Belichick's kind of guy because he could flip the field.
Lefties rule.
Offensively, let's go with the sexy positions. Let's go with the receiver, who I've really come to like, and I'm not sure that they necessarily need this mold at this position anymore after making the trade for Devontae Parker. But I really like Alec Pierce from Cincinnati. To me, he feels like a Patriot. 6'3", over 200 pounds. You can see the strength play on tape, and you can see the coordination and the jump ball ability that shows up time and time and time again. I think if he was in a little bit different offense, the numbers would be absolutely eye-popping for us, and he'd be talked about as maybe a back end of the first round guy, not a second or a third round guy, which I think he is right now. But even with what we saw from him at the college level, he gives you some special teams ability. He's used as a gunner on the punt team. He's really willing to do whatever you want. Had a chance to talk with him for the Next Pats podcast last week, and it does seem as though, from what I've heard, that the Patriots have shown some special teams interest in him. So he would be one of these guys who would come in. You wouldn't have to make him your number one right away, but he has the traits to really develop into that true X on the outside, and maybe he becomes insurance for Devontae Parker. But while he's doing that, he's giving you value in the kicking game as well. I just think he's got this great, diverse athletic background, which I really gravitate toward as someone who liked a lot of different sports growing up. He lettered in volleyball and basketball and football and track in high school. So he, to me, has become a draft crush. And then I would add, on the defensive side, one guy that I have really, I think, come to believe is underrated is Travis Jones from UConn. And I don't know how much Murph has watched of that guy, but he is power personified to me. And I know Jordan Davis is the freak of all freaks at that position this year. Yeah. But if not for Jordan Davis, we would be talking about Travis Jones as one of the biggest freaks in this year's draft. He's that athletic. He's that big. He's that powerful. Talk about the Senior Bowl. That guy had dominant moments down in Mobile. And so he's become a little bit of a draft crush of mine on the defensive side. Well,
that's cool. Draft crushes don't have to be kind of who the Patriots are going to take, or they don't need it can just be just who it is. It is who it is with the draft crush. So yeah, that's cool. Sorry, Steve, you go.
Well, I get little heart eye emojis when I watch those guys.
Hey, Phil, I firmly believe they're probably going to go defense. I mean, they'll go best player available, obviously, when they pick, but I have a feeling they're going to go defense. And I was thinking that it would probably be an edge guy. I just have that feeling. Is there an edge guy that stands out to you that you think would be a prototypical Patriot type of guy?
No doubt, Steve. The one that comes to mind first and foremost, and the projections on him in terms of where you'll find him in mock drafts is a little bit all over the map, and it gives me hope that he actually slides a little bit and he becomes a guy that maybe we're able to watch in Foxborough here for the foreseeable future. But it'd be Jermaine Johnson from Florida State.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Yeah.
And everything, can he? I mean, he's so big and powerful and long and explosive. He tested unbelievably well. Another Senior Bowl guy. We know how much the Patriots value that, but he really gives you a little bit of everything. Whereas I look at somebody like Josh Uche, who I really liked coming out of the draft and is a freak athlete. And I think if he had actually tested at the combine that year, he might have been a first round pick, never mind a bottom of the second round pick. He would have tested that well, is my understanding, talking to some people around the league. But Johnson gives you a little bit of everything, whereas I think Uche looks, at least right now, like a third down sort of pass rush specialist. Johnson could play on all three downs. He could play all four downs. You probably play him special teams as well. And he gives you nonstop effort, which I love. And it just sounds like he really knows what he's doing out there. He takes his craft seriously. And again, you'll see mock drafts. Some people have him inside the top 10.
Yeah.
I've seen consensus boards that have him in the low 20s. So who knows where he ends up, but edge has not been talked about as a real need for this Patriots team. And yet, if he falls all the way to 21, it would not surprise me at all if the Patriots pounced there.
Yeah. And, the question about him last year was he had transferred away from Georgia, and they were like, well, how's he going to play away from all these stars that Georgia has? I think he answered those questions.
Yep.
He had a really, really good year at Florida State. I just wanted to ask you another question, kind of bouncing around a little bit myself. With now that they have Devontae Parker, with the wide receiver class, there's a couple of Alabama wide receivers that are hurt, especially my draft binky that I really like is John Mechie.
Yep.
Do you think the chances of them taking a shot at him, maybe in the second round, possibly even if they trade back into the early third round, if he's still there, are more likely to happen now because they would have the time to let him get healthy?
I would think so, Steve. Again, I think this gives them flexibility, not just in terms of what they're going after, but in terms of the types of players that they view as quote unquote immediate needs, so you have a little bit less urgency at that receiver spot is how I would put it right now. And so if a guy needs a few weeks, if he needs to miss camp, if you're not going to be able to get him on the field till October, November, if you think that guy's going to be a really good player for you for the duration of his rookie contract, go ahead and make that move. I feel the same way about Jameson Williams now. I know they have other more pressing needs probably. Again, cornerback, I'd put right up there. If you want to go offensive line, I'd put right up there. Typically those great edge tackle players, you have to get those guys in the first round. So drafting an injured receiver in the first and sort of bypassing that opportunity is a lot to pass on. But I think somebody like Jameson Williams could end up being a special player and have the kind of impact on your quarterback that we've seen other great receivers have on their young quarterbacks. Look at Joe Burrow, I think, is a great example. You surround him with all kinds of talent. He didn't even need a great offensive line. He's a little bit different athlete than Mac Jones. I'll give him that. But in terms of arm strength, I think they're really similar. I really do. I think Joe Burrow's arm got a little bit stronger year 1 to year 2. And I would anticipate a little bit of growth there from Mac Jones year 1 to year 2 as well. But the best quarterbacks in the league aren't the best quarterbacks in the league without elite receiving talent. Think of all these guys that we put in the top tier quarterbacks every year. Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams. We'll see how that goes now that he doesn't have a number one guy, at least right now. Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. These guys are all surrounded by elite talent. I think Williams has that opportunity to be that guy. I love Mechie too, because Mechie feels like a real all-around player to me, Steve. Tough, smart, exactly what you usually love. I don't know if he's going to be a game breaker the way that Williams could be potentially, but he could be a really good pro for a long time. And I would think that now that you've rounded out your receiving group a little bit, you feel a little bit better about maybe going after one of those injured guys.
Great. Murph?
Hey, Bud, we talked about immediate need, and Bill has really gone for immediate need over the last 3 or 4 drafts. If you go back and look at it at the top, does it give you pause? Does it worry you at all, the amount of teams that have multiple first-round picks in this year's draft and maybe using a second pick that's above what the Patriots have and going after some of these players that we just talked about?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting this year with all of the draft ammo that some of these teams have. And I wonder if they're done dealing, in all honesty, some of them, especially the ones that need quarterbacks, like the Saints, for instance.
Yeah, they just pulled off a huge one.
Yeah, if they're not using that draft capital that they just acquired from Philly to go get a quarterback, I'm really not sure what they're doing. That's the kind of move you get to get a quarterback.
Right.
Really nothing else. Unless you feel like, oh, we've got our guy in Jameis and we just need a tackle and there might be a run on tackles. That's possible. I wouldn't necessarily fault that line of thinking, but we don't usually see these kinds of trades get made for tackle. So we'll see on that. I just think it is that kind of year, Murph, where whether you're talking about teams with 2 first-round picks or you're just talking about being where the Patriots are.
Yep.
after pick number 20.
Right.
You can let the draft come to you to an extent. And if more quarterbacks go off the board, say 2 or 3 go off before pick number 20, I don't think that's totally out of the question. It would surprise me maybe a little bit if 3, but who's to say that won't happen? If that does happen and a Jermaine Johnson falls to you, or a Jordan Davis potentially falls to you, I don't know what's happening. I think he's a guy all day long, and he probably should be a top 10 guy in my opinion. The league doesn't necessarily value his position all that much. If you get a great player, fall to you the way Vince Wilfork fell to them in 2004, sit there, make that pick, feel great about it. Otherwise, if you feel like you're in that range where you're looking at a Kaiir Elam and a Dax Hill and a Bernard Raymond and maybe a Trevor Penning, and they're all there for you in that range, and you feel like you can move back 6, 7, 8 spots and still get one of those guys, go ahead and do that and add that draft capital and draft in bulk. That's what the smart teams do. You draft in bulk. You take as many darts as you can. You stuff them in your hot little hand there, and you fire them one at a time at the bullseye, at the bullseye, and you see if you can hit. It's really as simple as that, because we know how much of a crapshoot the draft is sometimes. So I think it's a good opportunity for them, even though there's these teams that seem to have a ton of ammo. And you're right, we could see a lot of premium positions go off the board when the Patriots need those. It's a good year to just stockpile as many as you can, because even though the very top of the class feels a little bit thin in terms of high-end talent, you're going to see starters come off the board all the way through the 4th.
Right.
Get as many of those as you can and see what happens.
Yeah, between like 25 and 60, you were just, filling needs with basically the same skill set that you would have gotten, 30 picks higher. I think that's the type of draft that I'm seeing here. I'm just scared to death that Green Bay is going to come in and double dip and take all the freaking Alabama wide receivers just to give Junior somebody to throw to, because he's got no one out there. Go ahead, Claire.
We've had a question, Phil. Lee Noons, he's terrified about not having a true fullback. Jonnu is strong, but Jakob was a tank. Can you talk him down, please? Also, did you ever come up with a name for the 985-pound run block formation?
What did we call that? I think we called that formation where they had Mike Owenu and Trent Brown and Jakob Johnson and a tight end on the field all at the same time. I think we called that the total eclipse. I started calling it total eclipse.
He likes the Patriot Moving Company.
Well, the question is, do we have to retire that, though, now that Jakob Johnson is gone? And I really think that the Patriots, and he made some comments to German media that, the Patriots basically told him, hey, sorry, Jakob, we're just not going to have your position on the roster anymore. So good luck finding it elsewhere. I spoke to one team builder who's familiar with how the Patriots do things last week down at the owners' meetings, who said, listen, this would be classic Bill, would be to try to get away with still having that fullback role in your playbook, but not having the devoted, specific fullback player on your roster. So get that gig from somebody else at another position, essentially. And to me, the most likely candidate for that is Jonnu Smith. And I agree with Lee. He is not going to be the lead blocker unless he shows us something he hasn't shown us yet. He's not going to be the lead blocker that Jakob Johnson was. He's not going to be the lead blocker that James Devlin was. He's just not the same kind of player in there. It takes a special kind of mentality, really, to take on that role, and a willingness to stick your nose in where most people don't want it, and be willing to sacrifice like that. And so for Jonnu Smith, who's one of the highest paid tight ends in football, who's a truly gifted athlete, right? One of the best, height, weight, speed athletes they've ever had in the program here, and they've had some great ones. I just don't know if you're going to get the same kind of impact out of him at that fullback spot. And so I do think we'll see more 12 personnel, and I do think we'll see some Jonnu Smith in the backfield. But I think you're going to have to get him on the move a little bit more. I don't know if the downhill, taking on a linebacker one-on-one thing is going to be his thing. It's going to be his strong suit if they're using him that way. I would think that they would try to use him a little bit more like how the Niners use Kyle Juszczyk. And it's a different scheme. It's a different offense than the wide zone system. that they use in San Francisco. But can you motion him out of the backfield and into the slot, or vice versa? Can you let him run routes out of the backfield? Can you just get him on the move on some of those zone stretch plays and get him blocking on the move, maybe some safeties and some cornerbacks? I would feel really good about that. And I think that's the kind of thing they're going to have to try to do to get the most out of him. But to answer Lee's question, I don't think you're going to see Jakob Johnson become a better tight end, which he needs to be, and give you representative fullback play the way you're used to seeing it. I think it's just going to look a little bit different back there this year.
So we're not really talking him very well, are we?
I don't think I'm talking him. Murph wants to see Dalton Keene at fullback, but even he's a little.
Hey, I've been on that hill for 2 years, Murph. Don't come in, try and swoop in and steal my thunder now.
Listen,
thank you very much.
They could try it, right? He was a lead blocker out of the backfield for Virginia Tech quite a bit.
Yeah.
You need to see him on the field. He needs to get out there. Yes. Healthy. He needs to play. And so we'll see. Devin Asiasi maybe is a name that we should be keeping in mind here too, because he is a little bit more so than Keene and more so than Jonnu, more of that bigger ball. I mean, they've been using fullback about 260 pounds back there. And that's more Devin Asiasi size than it is Smith or Keene. So that's a name.
That's true.
Yeah, but Devin's a wussy. Go ahead, Steve.
That remains to be seen.
Yeah, he's got to get out there. Is that both those guys from that draft class?
Yeah. Can't make the club from the tub, the old saying.
Exactly.
But a common, I guess, trade partner that people are mocking up is Kansas City with the Patriots, with them trading back. And Kansas City has a ton of draft capital this year. They have 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds. Do you see that as being likely? And, as a follow-up, I mean, a lot of people thought Kansas City was done once they traded Tyreek Hill, but with all of those draft picks, they can probably restock pretty well. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't say, as long as Patrick Mahomes is there and, throw Andy Reid into that mix, they're going to be competitive. They'll figure out a way to scheme it up. I do like Kansas City as a draft partner as well, just because of all the capital that they have. And I think they've also shown in the past that they're willing to be really aggressive when they identify the guy that they want in the first round. The Patriots have traded up as well. We saw them trade up for Chandler Jones, for Dante Hightower. Like they'll make those moves too if they spot one. But that makes sense to me. That's actually what I had in my most recent mock drafts, is the Patriots trading back with Kansas City. Yep. And there has been a real movement. I know you guys follow Patriots media, unlike anyone else, as part of the Patriots media core yourselves. But there's been a real Dax Hill movement. I don't know if you guys have sensed it.
You started it. You started it.
I don't know if I started it
now
or who started it.
This guy's going to be gone by 15. Damn it.
I can see why people really like him. He is versatile. He's athletic.
Yep.
He reminds me a lot of, just mentioned McCourty a few minutes ago. He reminds me a lot of Devin McCourty. He plays special teams. He tackles. He can blitz if you want him to blitz, but he can cover tight ends as well as receivers. You can play him outside. You can play him in the slot. You can play him deep. With the Patriots looking more like a zone team, now they'll never be full-on zone. Bill Belichick will tell you. Anybody in that building will tell you. There are times where you just have to play man. Third down, for the most part, when it's got to have it, you just got to play man, because you can scheme it up too easily against zone. But they will. What I've heard is, we should be expecting them to skew more towards zone this year than they have other years. And I think part of that is because, they might be lacking a little bit of the high-end talent at corner.
Yep.
But there's also this interesting trickle-up effect from the college game, where the Patriots are now willing to move off of their spot when it comes to the size of their linebackers, because they have to, because there are no more 250-pound linebackers, or there's very few coming out of the college ranks this year. And when you have those big hulking linebackers that the Patriots have had, they're usually great blitz options. But if you're getting smaller there and they're not as good in that phase, coming downhill and attacking in the passing game, if you want to use them to their strengths, you might be better off dropping those guys into coverage. So you're going to have your linebackers in coverage a little bit more often. Then you might be playing a little bit more zone. That's just kind of how it works. And so I think there's a couple things at play. You lose a great cover corner like J.C. Jackson. You lose Stephon Gilmore. You might skew more towards zone, but you also lose your ability to blitz as often as you liked, because the game is just changing. you might become more of a zone team because of that as well. So Dax Hill, to me, would fit that kind of scheme. And when you're talking about handing players off in coverage and having interchangeable sorts of skill sets, if you have Dax Hill and Devin McCourty and Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, Julius Peppers, all on the field now at the same time, you can cover a variety of different targets there. And no matter what kind of concepts or routes they're running, you can trade off responsibilities and feel really good about it. I left Jonathan Jones out of there too. Another, versatile, athletic, good tackler that you can use near the line of scrimmage who can cover a variety of different bodies. So I just think what they're doing defensively right now is really interesting to follow, and Hill would fit that mold really, really well.
Jonathan Jones said a couple of weeks ago that positionless defense is on its way up.
Yeah, I would agree with him. And, to me, when you look at, that dynamic that I'm talking about, where you can really feel like you're covered no matter what a team has on the field, right? So if it's Buffalo and they've got Devin Singletary in the backfield and Dawson Knox is in line, and they've got, they've got not Emmanuel Sanders anymore, but they have Stephon Diggs out wide, and maybe they have Davis in the slot as sort of a big slot. You can look at that back tight end slot combination, and you can have 3 or 4 of your defenders with eyes on those guys and say, hey, however they come into their route, we feel like we're covered. And those types of players really is what killed them last year. Now, a lot of that is because, listen, they played pretty well against the guys who went deep because they had J.C. Jackson. Now they don't, so that may change. But where they were really hurt the most last year was in the short to intermediate range, in the flats, those shallow crossers, catch and run stuff. And so now that they're athletic there, they're versatile there, they've got a bunch of different athletes they can throw at that problem. Good tacklers as well, I should mention, in this sort of catch and run age in the NFL where there's a lot of RPO, there's a lot of quick hit, get it to your playmakers in space and watch them go. I think the Patriots have done pretty well to address some of their problems from 2021.
We've had a question about defense from Joel. Do you think the defense, the way it's being constructed, is a response to the quickness in the receivers around the league, Phil?
I think that's part of it. I think it's just athleticism from all of those positions in general. So you're talking about having to worry about backs and having to worry about athletic tight ends that are really big slot receivers most of the time. And now every team has not just a slot receiver, but also a big slot receiver that kind of is between that slot tight end and the traditional, Wes Welker looking guy. When you have all of these different types of weapons, and I think, part of, again, talk about the trickle up effect from the college game where the passing attacks are so prevalent, and that is all you do at the college level now. There's such a variety of flavor coming to the NFL at that receiver position that you have to have bodies to handle them all. It's a matchup league at the end of the day, whether you're playing man or zone. And so if you don't have the athletes to run with those guys, you can really be up a creek quickly. So I think part of it is about quickness. Part of it is just about the diversity of passing attacks in today's game in general, that you want to feel like you have flexibility. That's the word that I keep hearing when I talk to personnel people about, okay, well, how's Peppers going to fit in here? And what's the rest of the group look like? And, Peppers might be more of a zone player than a man player now, but you have some other players that are in the secondary that play the same position that might be better man players than zone players. So now not only are you talking about flexibility matchup to matchup and offensive weapon to offensive weapon, but now you're talking about, depending on the situation, do we want to be man? Do we want to be zone? What does the quarterback do? Is he a scrambling quarterback or is he a pocket quarterback? Because if he's a scrambler, maybe we're going to have to play zone because we want zone eyes in the backfield with our eyes able to track that quarterback in case he breaks the pocket. So there's a lot of different variables every single week, and the more athletes you have, the better when it comes to being able to slow those things down.
Yeah, Phil, you recently wrote about the coaches meeting and how Belichick has commented that he thinks his staff is complete. I mean, if you guys haven't read it, please go and check out NBCsports.com where you'll find that and more from Phil, folks. Were you surprised at that at all?
I wasn't surprised when he told us, Claire, because by now most of the changes have been made. If he had told that to us, I would say 3 months ago, it would have surprised me. Because I can tell you, it's surprised essentially the entirety of the league. when we're at the combine and we're talking to coaches across the league and scouts and personnel people, front office people, when we're at the league meetings and there are more there, it's mostly head coaches there, but you're seeing other front office executives all over Palm Beach. Not a one, Claire, really has said, well, that makes sense what the Patriots are doing on their coaching staff right now. They'll be just fine. You get plenty of people who do say, well, it's Bill Belichick and he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But when you look at just the responsibilities that are seemingly up for grabs right now between quarterback coach and play caller and offensive line coach, those are arguably the three most important offensive jobs on your staff.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say in an offensive league, those are the three most important jobs on your staff. And, maybe outside of head coach, right? Who's the CEO and is supposed to be overseeing the entire deal. What you get from people when they see the Patriots and how things are set up right now, especially considering you have a second-year quarterback, there's a lot of shock and awe there. Mm-hmm. And people are dying to see how it works. But you're also not hearing a lot of fear from Patriots opponents that it's going to be very smooth right away. So that's something that Bill Belichick's going to have to try to prove the people wrong about.
Sorry, Murph, go.
No, just circling back to the other side of the ball, the guy that I've truly fallen in love with this year, that everybody that we're talking to, especially Steve, is jumping down my throat that it's never going to happen, is Nakobe Dean. This kid is a true game changer. We talked so much about how the Patriots just could not stop the run last year. The RPO quarterbacks that are in this league and especially in this division now, this is a kid that I think could really step in right away and end a lot of the issues that the Patriots have had. Does Dean fit here? Does the way that Bill has been going about building this roster, should it give me hope that this is a kid that could be in a Patriots uniform for the foreseeable future?
So a few things on Nakobe Dean. Number one, we're going to have him on the Next Pats podcast this week. So keep an eye for that. That'll be a fun guest for us to have. And I would say the next thing for me is he is more, I would say, within the Patriots prototype now than he would have been
3 years ago,
last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Because again, the Patriots have, now this is my understanding, they have come to accept that, Leo Chanel from Wisconsin aside this year, a 250-pound backer who's a freak athlete that I think would really fit the Patriots mold really well. There just aren't that many of those guys. And so instead of forcing it and finding the only 2 or 3 250-pound plus backers that are in college football and making sure you land those guys, they've got to be more flexible. And so to have Nakobe Dean, who's going to weigh probably in the 220s, he was at 229 at the combine this year, is more of a possibility than ever before, I would say. His play speed is phenomenal. I know there's love for him in the building in terms of his style of play. I do think there are some athletic concerns from personnel people that I've spoken to, which surprises me, given what we see from him on film.
Yeah.
But you guys have noticed, I'm sure, that he hasn't tested. He didn't test at the combine. He didn't test at his pro day. Usually there's a reason for that. Now, word is that he may test at some point in time before the draft here, but the people that I've spoken to point to Quay Walker, for instance, Nakobe Dean's teammate, who also plays off the ball linebacker, as the really special athlete of the two. Whereas Dean has what is for scouts at least, is a difficult combination of being quote unquote undersized and maybe not a great athlete. And usually at the NFL level, that doesn't play. Now, what I would say is watch him in the SEC, which is the best conference in the country. It seems to play just fine.
Yep.
And so.
And Phil froze up.
Yeah.
Poor Phil. He gives his computer such a workout, and he froze up. At least I got my Nakobe Dean question in before then. Phil, if you can hear me, maybe if you exit and come back in, that would be helpful on that situation. I know I've had to do that a couple of times here on the StreamYard.
But what do you think while we're waiting for Phil to come back? Because I was going to ask him about another Alabama linebacker, Christian Harris. How do you feel about him if the Patriots were to pick him up, say, in the second round?
I think they could do a hell of a lot worse. That's for damn sure. Harris is just, you know, he brings it all. He brings it all on every freaking every play. And yeah, I wouldn't mind that in the second round if they went and they grabbed a wide receiver, or like we were talking about earlier, a guard in the first.
Yeah. So Claire, what do you think about Harris?
He isn't a guy that I can't comment. He's not a guy that I really looked at, so I hate to not add anything, but he's not somebody I really saw in the combine, so I can't really comment, unfortunately.
You know,
I just have that feeling they're going to go defense in the first
too.
round. You know, and I think it's you know, obviously it will all depend on what's available to them, but you know, you're looking at, you know, some guys on the edge, and if that was, I was hoping Phil was gonna say Jermaine Johnson, because that was the guy I kind of had my eye on.
Yeah,
I think he'd be a perfect fit for the team. You know, he's got some good size, he's athletic, he's got a nonstop motor. But you know, like Phil said, if a guy like Jordan Davis somehow falls to 21, boy, you put him next to Barmore, and you have two incredibly, you know, disruptive guys in
right.
there.
You know, and as we were saying, it you know, stopping the run is just paramount in the issues that this team had last year. If you can't stop the run, you can't be a running football team. And Bill is trying to build a running football team that with a good complementary passing game. And I would give serious thought to that, Steve.
Oh, I mean, if he's there, I mean, you talk about a guy that's 340 pounds and athletic is all creation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I watched him run at the combine, the first thing I thought was that must be a misprint. Because there's no way he can, you know, he can move that fast for somebody who's that big, but he obviously did. I mean, you know, that's just incredible. But who do you like in the first round, Claire?
See, I'm really struggling, to be honest with you, to make a decision now, because before they got rid of Mason and before Karras went, I was like, cornerback. I got no problem. Cornerback, number one. Don't necessarily know exactly who, as in name-wise, because I don't get to see the college football, as I said. But it's like, whatever. The best cornerback at 21, that's what I want. Now, they go and trade away Shaq Mason and things like this, and they bring in Malcolm Butler, which I don't know if he's really going to be CB1, but if you need a veteran guy there, that kind of thing, it's like... So now I'm really torn because we need an O-lineman. We need a tackle/guard man person. I'd like a very versatile one because I keep flipping between if they need a tackle more than they need a guard, and they need guard more than they need tackle for the future, and this, that, and the other. So I'd really like a really good offensive lineman who's can play both, who's very versatile. Now, do I want that with pick number 21? I don't know. I don't know if I can do it, but I know that it's something that they really, really need. So I'm still kind of cornerback at 21, but I really want a good offensive lineman as well. So you said it's tight end.
You know, an interesting name for offensive lineman. This morning in his, I think it was his third mock draft, Evan Lazar had the kid from Georgia, and I know I'm going to butcher his name, J-Marie Salyer.
Yep.
He played all 5 positions for Georgia on the offensive line. And, I mean, you talk about a guy who's versatile. He can play anywhere. He played, I think, almost exclusively as left tackle, but he can play anywhere on the offensive line. And you talk about a versatile guy, and if he's around in the third round, I mean, that's another guy who would be a really nice fit, because you could plug him in at guard.
Yeah.
If you have a need a tackle, he can swing over there. He can even play center. I mean, the guy's, he's a really good football player. So,
well, it looks like you can ask Phil, because we have returned our guest, Phil Perry. So if you want to bring him back in, we'll add him back to the stream. There you go. Phil, welcome back.
Sorry, guys.
He's on the road now.
Sorry, guys. I'm just a dummy. You guys know that by now. But I thought I had my phone plugged in that entire time we were talking, and it wasn't plugged in. So
it wasn't plugged in.
It wasn't plugged in. The phone was plugged in. The thing in the wall wasn't quite plugged in, so my phone dies in the middle of our chat here. And so I'm sorry for that. But
dedication right here, people.
I know.
Now I'm on the car. Now I'm on the car charger, and I'm supposed to go drop a backpack at school. Life is really coming at me fast here, because we left the backpack at school, and so we got to bring the lunch over to the 5-year-old at school, and so it's just another day in the life of a guy who doesn't know anything that's going on at any time ever. But I want to give you. I've got a couple minutes if you guys want to do like one more with me, and then I'll let the professionals handle the rest of the show, because I'm just a clown.
And we use that term lightly around here.
We do. So we missed most of what you had to say about Dean. And
that's okay. That's fine.
That's fine.
We'll move it along.
We'll move along. Claire, go ahead. I know you've got at least one more question, dear.
I do, but Steve hasn't had a chance, because I went on with my draft one. So I really want to give Steve a quick opportunity to
go ahead.
I mean, it's not draft, but the latest additions to the Patriots roster, kind of like you've got the Matt Wilson, Terrence Mitchell, Ty Montgomery, Butler, Peppers. Which do you think is going to be the most significant for the Patriots in this season? And do you think any of them actually either end up on the practice squad or get cut for 2022?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, somebody like Ty Montgomery, you look at that and you look at, the money involved, and, I certainly wouldn't say he's a guarantee to make the team. They are still going to. I know the practice squad rules have changed a little bit now that we're sort of in the, I don't want to say post-COVID era, because we know it's, feels like we're never going to be truly post-COVID, but the rules have changed. I need to brush up on the rules. I could see Montgomery being a guy who doesn't necessarily have a role. The guy that I think has the potential to make the biggest impact is Parker. Not just because it's on the offensive side and everything he could do for your quarterback, but I look at him as, if he is the guy that he was in 2019, and there are a lot of ifs associated with that, right? He has to be on the field, number one. That's the 1 year he's had fully healthy. But he has to be able to dip into whatever, athleticism he had 3 seasons ago, basically now. But if he's that guy, and I do think there's reason to believe he could be that guy, he's still 29. That year in 2019, he was playing a Patriots-style offense under Chad O'Shea with a quarterback who is a total gunslinger in Ryan Fitzpatrick. And we know that's not Mac Jones, but I do think Mac Jones is more of a pro-style quarterback than Tua Tagovailoa is. That's been an RPO offense the last few years, which, again, get it to your playmakers in space and watch them go. And Devontae Parker can do some of that. It's not really his game. If he's that guy from a couple of years ago, that could change everything for your offense. And the reason I say that is because the way the Patriots were played last year was very specific. Defenses were not worried about them deep down the field. And so they took that safety that a lot of teams now drop into those too high safety coverages that we're seeing around the league now everywhere.
Didn't see it at all.
They took that second safety and they said, why are we going to play too high? This team doesn't throw down the field. They've got nobody that scares us down the field. So they took that extra player and they dropped him into the box. Against the run, it led to Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson being among the league leaders facing loaded 8-man boxes last year when they took carries. Not what you're looking for. It's actually pretty remarkable that they were as effective as they were in the run game with the number of stacked boxes that they saw. Number two, Mac Jones, with that extra defender, again, that you have, he's just a free player now. We don't need to drop him deep. So what do we do with this guy? Mac Jones was blitzed at the second highest rate in all of football last year. And it wasn't necessarily because he was a bad quarterback against the blitz. His numbers were lower against the blitz, but it was because why not blitz? We don't need that guy deep. If we can send an extra rusher in the pass game, if we can just attack the line of scrimmage and come downhill with force, play after play after play, we can play the run on the way to the quarterback with that extra defender that we have. So now, if Devontae Parker is somebody that forces that player out of the box and out of those blitz rush schemes, now Mac Jones isn't seeing quite as much pressure potentially. Now your running backs have more room to run. They're facing lighter boxes. You know, now it could free up some space in that short to intermediate area for all those short to intermediate targets that you have, whether they're tight ends or Jacoby Myers or James White out of the backfield. So again, he has to be on the field. He has to pose a real threat. But if he poses a real threat, he could change everything for the Patriots offense and really make life a lot easier for Mac Jones.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Phil, did you know what was your take on the fact that Parker wanted to be traded to New England?
Yeah, it was interesting to me, Steve. I think, you know, I don't know how much it actually mattered at the end of the day. You know, I'm sure he has respect for Bill Belichick. I know the respect is coming from Bill Belichick for Devontae Parker. He's liked this player for a while now. Honestly, because for the same reasons they liked N'Keal Harry. You know, they do value that skill set. I'm not sure it mattered just because he didn't have a no trade clause. I think what ended up happening was the Patriots made the best offer. And you know, honestly, kudos to the Dolphins for taking the best offer. I think teams overthink this stuff way too much. Well, we don't want him in the conference. We don't want him in the division. And you might be passing on a pretty good deal from a team that's willing to overpay because they play you once or twice a year. And that return could help you much more than the return you would be getting by sending him somewhere else. So I get it psychologically. I just think teams get too hung up on that, and they might be missing out on real returns. So I actually give the Dolphins some credit. The Patriots had to outbid other teams by being in the division, and they looked at it and they said, listen, this deal is significantly better than you know, the deal that we were maybe going to get from Dallas or from Green Bay or whoever else might have been interested. And so let's take it. So I think that's really what it came down to. That's why it got done.
Fantastic. Phil, I want to thank you for not bringing up Bo Melton at all today. You know, I've really had it. People stop asking me about Bo Melton. It's always a pleasure to have you here, but it's just a joy. You're on the Mount Rushmore of our guests every year. It's just deeper chiseled in stone. We really love it. We hope to have you back maybe right after the draft, maybe the week or two after the draft, if you can make time for us. I know that's a really busy time for you, but thank you again for making, you know, everything. Just every time I ask, you're right there, and you don't know how much that means to all three of us. And you're a good friend and a great guy to have on the show. We hope to have you back real soon. Claire, give your little goodbyes.
Are we closing out the show with Phil? So thank you, Phil. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you for listening, folks. This has been One Patriots Place, brought to you by e2gsports.com. We have been your hosts, Steve, Murph and Clare. As ever, we'd like to greatly thank the fantastic Phil Perry for his time and his insight. Tune in next time and go Pats.
Go Pats. Phil, thank you.